Welcome to the east, where the temples rise high. Spa smells like jazz and the sheets of fly. Came for a cleanse, a retreat for your soul. The lotus blooms and trauma, control it not to go.
Okay, so I have not discussed the White Lotus season 3 on this channel yet. Now that it's over, I feel like we need to talk about it, because the White Lotus, I thought season 1 was essentially a perfect season of television. From start to finish. Now, I know people have their complaints about that season, but I just thought it was fantastic. I think that what Mike White and what the crew and cast and everyone working on that show, what they did really well was they set up such a great conflict that was able to sort of bring in all the different guests and staff and characters on that show in a way that worked, that made it feel like one story taking place. Even though there were lots of little side stories, little subplots, everything sort of felt connected in a really, really, really great way. And the conflict between Shane and Armand, which drove that season. I mean, you didn't realize it at first necessarily, but it just sort of continued to escalate throughout the season. That was a really great conflict, and it led to, it led to the beginning. The ending is the beginning in the White Lotus every season, but it did a really great job of connecting all the dots and sort of keeping the tension kind of rising as Armand sort of slowly devolves into debauchery and madness and revenge. And it just had the perfect balance between both the staff and the guests and the different groups and all their little stories sort of worked together perfectly. It was a very well written season of television. Season 2, I think, was a little less tight. I think it was. I think it ended up being really great. It culminated into something that was extremely funny, for one thing. Tanya's character, Tanya McQuaid, Jennifer Coolidge's character, was much more prominent in that season, and her death was hilarious. And just the whole, her realizing that these men she's spending time with, the gays, are out to get her, and the sort of final shootout where she kind of blind fires and kills everybody and then derps herself off the boat. I mean, it's very, very funny. There's just so much great comedy there. But that was sort of, it wasn't woven together with the other stories quite as well as the first season, but those other stories were still really interesting. You had the two couples and their weird, strained dynamic. You had the generation of three men, the grandfather, the father, the son, and their dynamic around, infidelity and sex. And this was sort of, all of this was sort of tied together with the prostitute and the staff. Everything fit. It wasn't quite as tight or as well put together as season 1, but it ended so well that I didn't really care. I still thought season 2 was phenomenal. Season 3 lost a lot of what made those two seasons so perfect. Season 3, and I didn't make a video, but I wrote a review for each episode, and I was very, very, very upbeat about this season at first, even though it was slow, even though I do think that they did some weird things with cinematography, like the shallowed up the field, it creates that bokeh blur, like just the slow shots, all the B-roll, the pacing felt too slow, but I kept thinking, okay, slow is not bad. I like slow. I don't think slow in and of itself is a criticism of something. Like a TV show can be really, really great and slow and still work. If it builds to something, if there is payoff, but the problem with this season, it's been very uneventful. And I think, it was episode 7 where I was like, okay, wait a minute. Like, there should have been more confluence at this point. More storylines should have intersected. More of these characters should have had something to do beyond, like Timothy, Jason Isaac's character. He's facing this, jail time, the ruin of his entire fortune, his family. And so we've spent a lot of time with him kind of deliberating over what to do. The problem is that there's just been so much focus on him kind of like popping pills and staring forlornly into the camera. And, there's some funny bits with Parker Posey, who plays his wife, Victoria. There's been some good character moments. And I think what I've realized about this season is that there's lots of really good moments. Like there's lots of these like, oh, something bad's about to happen and then it doesn't. And you're like, oh, okay. All right, cool. That they misdirected us a little bit here. I thought the Russians were drugging those women. I thought, and if the payoff had started to happen around episode 6, episode 7, and we started to see these things like come together in a way, like then I think this season could have wrapped up as a really great season. But they saved pretty much everything for the finale. So we went 7 episodes with very, very little happening. Not just slow, but very, very little happening. And then they tried to wrap it all up in episode 8, in the finale. And the problem is that ultimately, only one of these storylines ended up being a full arc with a compelling beginning, middle, and end, and a payoff. And that was the Rick revenge storyline. Rick and Chelsea, Walton Goggins, and Amy Lee Wood. And yet, unfortunately, I feel like that all ended in cliche. Rick, goes to Bangkok to confront this guy who killed his father, and he comes back to the hotel. He's all happy and at peace and serene. He spent the whole season being this grumpy, tortured soul who just frets forever about his ruined life. It's kind of obnoxious in retrospect. He's got this young, hot girlfriend who loves him and adores him for all the wrong reasons. Basically, she thinks she can fix him. Then, for some reason, he goes back and just chills at the hotel. This guy that he just confronted and knocked down owns the hotel. But for some reason, I guess because the plot demands it, he just goes back and chills and has breakfast. And then the guy shows up, of course, and insults his mother and doesn't divulge that he's in fact his father. So one thing leads to another. Rick grabs his gun, shoots him dead, and the big shootout happens, and Chelsea's killed and Rick is killed. That is so cliche. Like, oh, he's your father. Like, who is surprised by this twist? Like, it's so predictable. And I'm not against things being predictable per se. Like, I don't need like a shocking twist. But it just feels like this was the one story out of all these storylines that built into anything, and then it ends in cliche. There were multiple storylines. The Ratliff storyline with Timothy and Victoria and their children. I mean, probably the biggest event there is that the two brothers had an incest moment, which just feels more like shock value than anything really particularly integral to the plot. We don't get to see the fallout of the revelations around Timothy's crimes. Like he committed fraud and embezzlement, and he's going to jail. And this has been this thing that's been built up the whole season. And defenders of the show will say, well, it's the ambiguity. Mike White likes to use ambiguity, and we don't know what happens after. But this is not a payoff. Like, they just sail into the sunset, and we don't really get to see any of their reactions. Just a brief moment of them, like, looking at their phones, and that's it. And that's really not satisfying to me as a viewer. The Gossip Girls, I've been calling them, the 3 women, the 3 white ladies, middle-aged white ladies who show up. That you've got Jacqueline and Kate and Lori, played by Megan Moynihan, Kate Bibb, and Carrie Coon. Their story, kept on like moving somewhere. We thought, there's a lot of gossip, a lot of backstabbing, and it kind of culminates in Lori's big monologue about how she's been sad and she's made all these life choices that were wrong. And she's, finally realized that it's like old friends that give her life meaning. Like, this was a story that if it was developed enough, probably in its own TV show, like it could have been a great story about female relationships and friendships. And instead it's just sort of like they go until they run out of time and then they wrap it up. And everyone's like, oh, Carrie Coon's so talented. And like, yeah, she gave a great monologue. Like, she's a really good actress. But this story is totally divorced from anything else that's happening in the show. Like, nothing about this story ties into any of the other stories. Why is it even here? Like, what's the point of this story? You could literally cut these 3 women from this season and lose nothing at all. You have some connection with the Russians who did the robbery, but that doesn't matter either. If it's Guy Talk, the Thai security guard, doesn't turn them in. He does shoot Rick in the back while carrying a woman who may or may not be dead as far as he knows. After saying he doesn't want to hurt anybody, he shoots him in the back in cold blood, an unarmed man who he doesn't know for sure is the shooter, and then reaps the benefits. Moop wants to be with him because she likes bad boys who are successful and confident, and he gets the promotion so he can drive around Srilata in her car, and he seems very happy about this. All his morals just thrown out the window. And again, like losing your morality, like the transformation of a moral good person into a bad person who does bad things to get ahead is an interesting story, but almost the entirety of that story takes place in one single moment rather than an actual character study. I just feel like they just glossed over his story. Like he struggles so much with whether he should turn in Valentine and the Russians, and then he just shoots Rick in the back. It just feels really lazy. It feels sloppy. This season, more so than being slow, feels sloppy to me. It feels like indulgent. This is one of the words I used in my written review, indulgent. It spends a lot of time in close-ups, zoomed into these characters' faces, long, slow shots, shots of the lily pads and the monkeys in the trees and the hotel. But it just spends so much time doing all of this, just masturbating cinematography masturbation. I don't know. It just spends so much time lingering on all these moments that it doesn't actually establish story in a way that it actually makes me care about these characters. And fundamentally, like, I have to care somewhat. I mean, I guess that I'm sad that Rick and Chelsea died, and that's like the most feeling I have from this show. In the Ratliff storyline, you also have Lachlan, the younger brother, drink the poison that his dad was going to kill, murder, suicide his family. And he backs out, and the next morning Lachlan wakes up and he sees the blender and he goes to make a protein shake with like all the goop. And there's like what he knows his dad described was bad coconut milk in the blender still. I mean, even like who makes a shake in a blender that hasn't been cleaned for hours and hours and hours, even if it wasn't bad coconut milk? Like, I know everyone's like, well, teenage boys are dumb. They don't clean it. Yeah, I'm sorry. Most teenage boys, even the dumb ones, if they know there's some like bad food in a blender, are going to rinse it out first. I understand why Timothy didn't. He was doped up on lorazepam and yada, yada, yada. But like, I hate this kind of thing in a TV show where it's like this big turn where, oh, this character, he's gonna drink the poison now because he just makes the stupidest, most unrealistic decision. Someone joked around. I've been talking about the guns this whole season and Chekhov's gun and sort of that idea that if a gun is shown in the first act, that it's going to be shot by the third. Someone made a joke in my comments about Chekhov's blender, which I thought was pretty funny. So fundamentally, like, I'm rambling about, because this whole season is so rambling. It's hard to pin down. Mike White said that he's trying to kind of examine identity through a Buddhist lens, and how identity and our attachment to identity and attachment to the things that we identify ourselves with and as, and how we identify cause suffering, right? And in every example, and you will look at these different characters, and in most of them, absolutely, like, their attachment to identity causes suffering. And I think there's a really interesting story there. It's just not this story, right? And what frustrates me is I see a lot of people talking about, like, oh, it's so profound. It's so profound. It's so, look what he's done. And it's like, it comes to a point where someone, an auteur, like someone who's done great work in the past, gets a free pass now in the future. That's like, you think, okay, this writer, he's so good. He's done such great stuff. What he does now, what he does here must be great and profound and deep. But really, it's very, very surface level. I mean, straight from that cliche revenge plot to the three women who, honestly, like, I don't know, did we really see how identity caused them suffering? Or did they just kind of spin their wheels, their narrative wheels all season, and just end up right where they were? Did that thesis that identity causes suffering really come through by the end of this? I don't think it did. I mean, I think you can see examples of how it does. And yet the real winners here are Belinda, who takes the blood money, Greg/Gary, who's living large on Tanya's fortune. I mean, does it cause suffering, or are we just like sailing away on our boat, happy if we've got money and sad if we don't? And maybe that's the thesis. Maybe the thesis is that money, it can buy you happiness. That greed is good, like Gordon Gekko style, right? I feel like this season was just a show without a real hook, a show without a real story. That hook in season 1 of Shane and Armand clashing over the room and building like a volcano about to erupt by the end of that season. That's a really good hook. Television needs a hook to draw us through each of these episodes to a finale. This season, it's like, hey, everybody loves us, so we can just dilly-dally along, and in the end, we'll try to wrap it all up, and the thing we don't feel like wrapping up, we're going to say that that's ambiguous, and you should just enjoy it. So that's my feelings about season 3. I really was all for this season for such a long time, and then last week and this week, I fell like Tanya right off the boat, and I'm just extremely disappointed. So thank you for watching. Like, subscribe, leave a comment, hit the notification bell. Let me know what you thought of season 3 of The White Lotus and the other 2 seasons. Are you a fan of this show? You think it's overhyped? Whatever. Let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching. Peace.
Came for a cleanse, I retreat for your soul. The lowest blooms and trauma, control it not to go. And cast our sins in silk and gold.